You won't believe what just came out of Lil Durk's camp, and this time, it's not just another rap beef or courtroom meltdown. No, this is something deeper, something darker. According to shocking new claims from inside Durk's legal circle, the FBI may have been playing a twisted double game this whole time, and the real truth behind King Von's case might have been buried on purpose. That's right. Lil Durk's legal team has come forward with alleged evidence that could flip the entire King Von narrative upside down, and fans are losing their minds. Hidden files, withheld footage, anonymous tips that led nowhere, and now, explosive accusations that the FBI may have intentionally misled the public. All while keeping the rap community locked in chaos. Was King Von set up from the very beginning? Was Durk being watched long before any charges were ever filed? And why did certain files just disappear from court records without explanation? In the next few minutes, we're diving into one of the most unbelievable and controversial turns in rap history. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear could change everything you thought you knew about Lil Durk, King Von, and the case that rocked hip-hop to its core. The courtroom was quiet, almost too quiet. Lil Durk sat at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly, jaw locked in tension. Behind him, his legal team was huddled, whispering with urgency. Their faces pale with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Something was off, and everyone in the room felt it. But no one expected what was about to happen. Just before the lunch recess, Durk's lead attorney, Malcolm Wright, stood up slowly, his eyes scanning the faces of the prosecution. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady but tense, "we have come into possession of highly disturbing information regarding the integrity of this investigation." The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly irritated by the interruption, but motioned for him to continue. What followed stunned everyone. Malcolm began to lay out a timeline that traced back to late 2019, months before King Von's death, showing that the FBI had already opened a surveillance operation on both Von and Durk. But it wasn't a standard case. According to the documents leaked to Durk's legal team just days before, there were signs of deliberate missteps and redactions in internal memos. Worse, critical evidence that could have cleared both rappers from past charges was never handed over to their defense. The courtroom gasped. Outside, word spread fast. Fans flooded Twitter and Instagram, demanding answers. Hashtags like #FreeVonTruth and #FBI Exposed started trending within hours. The hip-hop community was stunned. How could the FBI hide evidence that could have changed the entire course of King Von's story? Meanwhile, back in court, the tension exploded. Prosecutors pushed back hard, accusing Durk's team of fabricating the claims. But the defense had proof, real proof. Emails between junior agents discussing how to handle public response if the files were ever released. Messages marked as top priority about keeping certain informant identities under wraps, even if it meant manipulating testimonies. "What we're looking at," Malcolm said with cold precision, "isn't just negligence. It's sabotage." That's when it happened. From the back row, a woman stood up. No one recognized her at first. Dressed in a plain black hoodie, hair tucked into a cap, she raised her hand and said, "I need to speak." Security rushed toward her, but the judge, curious, allowed her to step forward. She introduced herself as Leisha Montgomery, a former intern at a federal office tied to the case. And then she dropped the bombshell. She had seen the files, not just copies, the originals. And what she saw, she claimed, were records showing that an unidentified informant had pushed the FBI to link Durk and Von to a 2020 shooting they had nothing to do with. They needed a face for the narrative, she said. They needed to justify months of failed surveillance. So they used King Von. Durk sat motionless, his eyes locked on Leisha as if trying to decide whether to believe her. The room was in chaos. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Whispers turned to shouting, and within minutes, the session was adjourned outside the courthouse. The scene was electric. Reporters swarmed the front steps. Fans chanted Durk's name, and social media exploded with clips from the hearing. Artists like Meek Mill, 21 Savage, and even unlikely voices like Russ tweeted their reactions. "If this is true, this is bigger than rap," one post read. "This is about how far they're willing to go to silence us." The energy was shifting. For months, the narrative around King Von's death had been one of street beefs and personal choices. But now, fans were asking deeper questions. Had Von been dragged into a political game he didn't even know he was part of? Was his rise in the industry seen as a threat? Behind closed doors, Lil Durk's team wasn't celebrating. They were furious. "We knew they were watching," Durk reportedly said to his lawyer that night, according to a leaked voice memo. "We just didn't know how deep it went." As the team pored over the newly surfaced files, more disturbing details emerged. The FBI had allegedly flagged King Von's interviews, his lyrics, even his social media interactions, not for monitoring, but for use in building a public profile that would justify future charges. One line in an internal report read, "Von is perfect. He fits the archetype." That was the word that made Durk snap. "Archetype," he repeated, slamming his fist on the table. "They turned us into a damn stereotype and used it to frame us." His manager, standing nearby, shook his head. "They weren't just watching you, bro. They were scripting the whole thing." Fans were shocked. Emotions ran high. The family was left divided. Some believed the narrative instantly. Others questioned it. Von's cousin reportedly posted on Facebook, "I always knew something was off. Von wasn't no saint, but they played him like a pawn. Rest in peace, big bro. They did you dirty." Overnight, YouTube channels, podcasts, and TikTok creators dove deep into the conspiracy. Side-by-side comparisons of court transcripts and the leaked files started popping up everywhere. One clip, showing a blurred-out figure labeled Confidential Source 47, caught massive attention after fans speculated that the snitch might be a well-known rapper who had beef with Von before his death. This theory caught fire suddenly. It wasn't just about Durk and Von, it was about who else might have been involved and who might have been protected. Rumors swirled about a major label executive who had allegedly tipped off federal agents about Von's whereabouts the night before a critical arrest. Others pointed fingers at a former friend-turned-rival of Von's, who disappeared from the public eye shortly after his death. Everything was in question now, but back in court, Durk's legal team prepared their next move, a formal request to dismiss multiple charges based on prosecutorial misconduct and suppression of evidence. And while that battle was still pending, the streets were buzzing with a single word: retaliation. Someone, somewhere, knew more, and they were scared. The next morning, downtown Chicago was on edge. Barricades were set up around the courthouse, helicopters hovered in the sky, and hundreds of fans gathered outside, chanting Durk's name, holding posters of King Von, and demanding justice. The tension was thicker than ever, not just for Durk, but for the entire culture inside. Lil Durk stepped into the courtroom looking different, not just in clothes or appearance, but in energy. Gone was the quiet, reserved rapper from the day before. This time, his shoulders were squared, his stare direct. He had been silent long enough. The judge, clearly aware of the growing pressure, allowed Durk's legal team to file their formal motion. Malcolm Wright stood again, voice louder, more confident now, as he read their accusations on the record: suppression of evidence, manipulation of informant statements, and intentional targeting of a public figure for political gain. But then came the twist no one saw coming. As Malcolm prepared to submit the leaked documents into evidence, a federal attorney burst into the courtroom, flanked by 2 agents. "We object," he said sharply. "Those files are classified and not admissible. They were obtained illegally." Gasps filled the courtroom again. Malcolm smirked. "Your Honor, these so-called classified documents contain direct proof that the government used false narratives to justify surveillance, and in the process destroyed 2 careers, one of which ended in death." The judge, caught between law and outrage, demanded a recess. Outside the courthouse, chaos erupted. The crowd began shouting, news crews swarmed, and a breaking update hit every major hip-hop outlet. The FBI was trying to suppress evidence that could potentially clear Lil Durk and change the entire King Von timeline. That same hour, a video went viral. A known Chicago street figure, who hadn't been seen in years, uploaded a clip to YouTube. In it, his face was blurred, voice altered. "You don't know half of what really happened to Von," he said. "They made sure of that. They didn't just follow him, they used him." The video detailed how, in early 2020, Von had received anonymous warnings to lay low and watch his circle. Apparently, he was being prepped for something, though he didn't know what. Von wasn't just hot in the streets, the voice said. He was hot on the Fed's radar. But not because he was dangerous, because he was influential. Fans, lost it? Comments flooded in by the thousands. So they targeted him for being real. One person asked. Von was finally making it out, and they pulled him back in. Emotions ran high. The family was left divided. Von's sister Kayla took to Instagram Live, her voice breaking as she said, "They played my brother like a chess piece, and y'all let them." Her tears turned into rage as she addressed the informant rumors directly. "Whoever snitched, whoever set him up, you're gonna get yours. We not done." Meanwhile, Lil Durk's inner circle was in full lockdown. His longtime friend and OTF member, Buka 600, reportedly confronted a former associate who'd been acting strange ever since Von passed. Sources close to the crew said there was a heated argument, with Buka yelling, "We know it was you. The streets know. It's only a matter of time." But Durk, despite the fury around him, remained focused. He wasn't interested in revenge, at least not publicly. He was after something bigger. Truth, his legal team doubled down, gathering more support from outside sources. One anonymous ex-federal tech analyst provided metadata, showing that surveillance footage tied to Von's last known location had been edited, frames removed, timestamps altered when this detail leaked. The internet exploded. Influencers, rap blogs, and even conspiracy theory channels jumped on it. Some compared it to major cover-ups in American history. Others claimed it proved a long-standing bias against black artists in the justice system. And still, the question lingered, why? Why would the FBI, a federal agency, go this far to shape a case around a rapper from Chicago? Was it just about crime and image? Or was there something deeper, something more political? Behind the scenes, whispers began spreading about a secret task force launched in 2018. Meant to monitor high-profile rappers with influence over youth. King Von's rise, according to some, made him a prime candidate. His lyrics were raw, unfiltered. His stories weren't just about violence, they were about survival. They connected with people, and maybe that's what scared them. The more fans dug into it, the more threads they pulled. One Reddit user found old court documents from a completely different case where the same federal agent involved in the Durk-Von investigation had been reprimanded for withholding evidence. Others traced odd money trails between federal offices and private security contractors hired to consult on music industry threats. By now, the hip-hop world was in full-on uproar. Artists began speaking out. J. Cole posted a cryptic tweet that simply said, truth always finds its way. Cardi B commented under a viral clip, "That boy Von ain't deserve none of this. I hope they rot." Even Drake, usually silent on legal drama, posted a broken heart emoji on his story with a caption that read, "The system ain't never been for us." Inside Durk's camp, the weight was growing. "I feel like they killed him twice," Durk reportedly said to a friend. "Once when he died, again when they lied." And still, the legal battle raged on. The judge, under immense public pressure, scheduled a special hearing to review the motion to dismiss the charges. It would be televised, something rarely done in cases like this, but given the national interest and the cultural implications, it was allowed. People began calling it the hearing of the decade. Networks prepared live coverage. Podcasts planned emergency episodes. Fans camped outside the courthouse the night before, holding candles for Von and signs that read, "We want the truth." As the sun rose over Chicago, a storm was coming. Not from the sky, but from the truth that had been buried for too long. Durk walked into that courtroom knowing everything was on the line. Not just his freedom, not just Von's legacy, but the soul of hip-hop itself. The courthouse was packed, every seat filled. Outside, streets were shut down as fans, journalists, and activists waited for what was now being called the biggest legal moment in modern hip-hop history. The pressure was suffocating, and yet, Lil Durk remained calm. He sat with his hands folded, lips pressed in a straight line, watching every movement around him. The judge entered. Cameras flashed. Rose. This wasn't just another hearing. This was the moment where truth and power would finally collide. "Mr. Wright," the judge began, referring to Durk's lead attorney, "you may proceed with your presentation." Malcolm stepped forward and, without hesitation, dropped a black flash drive onto the evidence table. "Your Honor," he said, "what you're about to see will reveal not just injustice, but orchestration. This isn't about a rapper. It's about a system that created a villain and silenced the victim." The lights dimmed. A projector clicked on. What followed was a 7-minute video containing audio recordings, clipped surveillance footage, and reconstructed digital files, all allegedly pulled from internal federal servers. Voices could be heard saying things like, "We need him off the streets before he becomes too big, and don't leak anything that could humanize him." The courtroom was stunned. Even the judge, who had remained stone-faced throughout most of the case, blinked in disbelief. Prosecutors tried to object, but the damage was done. The seed had been planted, and now it was growing into a wildfire. The video ended with one chilling line from a redacted source. "He's not dangerous. He's persuasive." That's the threat. Outside, chaos erupted. People chanted Von's name in unison. Clips from the courtroom flooded Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube within minutes. Fans were calling it a scripted takedown. Some compared it to the way black leaders were targeted in the past. King Von wasn't just a rapper anymore. He was a symbol of how narratives are created, controlled, and destroyed. Back in the courtroom, Lil Durk leaned over to whisper something to Malcolm. No one could hear what he said, but his expression had changed. This was personal now, deeper than legal battles or charges. It was about clearing the name of the brother he lost. Suddenly, the judge called for a recess. But before leaving, he made a rare statement from the bench. "This court has never seen a case quite like this. We will review all evidence carefully. But make no mistake, if the claims are true, this is more than a mistrial. This is misconduct on a national level." Reporters scrambled out of the room to break the story. Headlines appeared within minutes. Double quotes: "FBI under fire for role in King Von case." Leaked files suggest Von was targeted. Durk's team delivers evidence that could shake the justice system. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, things were getting even uglier. Within hours of the flash drive video airing in court, an anonymous email landed in the inbox of Malcolm Wright. It contained screenshots of internal memos from a federal agent warning that if Durk testifies, the pressure will shift and control will be lost. The implication was terrifying. Someone didn't want Lil Durk to speak, and yet Durk insisted on doing just that. He announced through his lawyer that he would be releasing a personal statement during a live stream that evening. Fans waited anxiously. At exactly 8 p.m., the screen went live. Durk sat in a dark studio wearing a plain hoodie. No chains, no entourage. Just him, his voice, and the truth he had held in for too long. "I ain't never been no saint," he began. But what they did to Von, that wasn't the streets. That was them. He spoke slowly, emotionally. They didn't care who he was becoming. They cared about how powerful he was. He made it out, and he made others believe they could too. And that scared them. He paused. "They ain't just take my brother. They tried to take our story and flip it, make us the villains. But nah, we was the ones trying to survive." Millions watched live. The clip was shared across every platform with the caption, "Durk speaks." But while the fans rallied behind him, not everyone was on his side. Former allies began to distance themselves. One producer who worked with Von before his death posted a cryptic tweet. "Sometimes the truth is too dangerous. I got a family to feed." Others stayed silent altogether. Meanwhile, a bombshell tip came in from a former journalist who had been investigating federal surveillance programs targeting musicians. She reached out to Durk's team with a warning. There was more, much more. And it led back to a shadow group operating inside a private security firm that contracted with both government agencies and record labels. They weren't just watching rappers, she said. They were working with labels to keep certain artists in check. The theory exploded across the internet. People began calling it Operation Silence. Reddit threads were filled with timelines, theories, and alleged whistleblowers. Some even claimed King Von's rapid rise made him a target not just for law enforcement, but for those who profited off controlling narratives in hip-hop. And suddenly, attention turned to Von's label. People began questioning what they knew. Had someone from the inside been feeding information? Was Von too independent for the industry's comfort? Durk refused to point fingers directly, but his silence spoke volumes. The tension in the music world was now at a boiling point. That same night, another shocking revelation hit the public. A second whistleblower leaked an audio recording of a phone call between two unidentified individuals, one allegedly from law enforcement, the other from a label executive. The voice said, "As long as he stays off the charts, he's not a problem. But if he starts speaking out, we'll have to handle it." Fans were horrified. It's comments like "they planned this and this goes beyond rap" flooded every post. Celebrities started distancing themselves from major institutions. One major podcast canceled its label-sponsored segment entirely. Another influencer posted, "You see now? It was never about music, was always about control." And still, the truth wasn't done coming out. Because just as the public began to wrap their heads around the setup, a new name entered the story. Someone who had stayed quiet for too long, and who, according to new court documents, may have played a far bigger role in King Von's downfall than anyone realized. And the next court date was already on the calendar. The energy in Chicago was different now. The movement wasn't just about clearing Lil Durk's name or honoring King Von. It had become something larger, a challenge to the system, to the structures that used young black voices as entertainment, only to silence them when they became too loud, too real, too powerful. And as the next day approached, fans, critics, and enemies all waited for what would happen when the final piece of the puzzle was revealed. As dawn broke over the city, the courthouse was already swarming. Media trucks lined the block. Influencers live-streamed from the sidewalks. Fans held signs that read, "Truth over control," and Von's voice still echoes. But behind all the noise, one thing hung heavy in the air. Who is the insider that everyone had missed? Inside the courtroom, tension was suffocating. Lil Durk sat still, hands clasped tight, eyes forward. The world was waiting on one name, and now, the documents were finally unsealed. The judge entered, cleared his throat, and read aloud the identity of the key informant. Gasps ripped through the courtroom. It wasn't a street rival. It wasn't an old enemy. It was someone close. Someone Durk once called family. Marcus "Manny" Harris, a longtime OTA affiliate who had appeared in music videos, backstage at shows, and even at King Von's funeral, was the one who had fed confidential info to authorities. The betrayal was nuclear. Tears welled up in Durk's eyes. He didn't cry, but his chest rose sharply as he gritted his teeth. In the back of the room, one of Von's cousins stood up and yelled, "We trusted you." Before being escorted out by security, the prosecution tried to downplay Manny's role, calling him a concerned citizen, but it was too late. Durk's legal team produced texts, location pings, and even a voice recording of Manny coaching someone on what to say to federal agents in exchange for immunity. But why? Why would Manny do this? Rumors swirled that Manny had gotten caught up in his own legal trouble and was offered a deal. Feed them dirt on Durk and Von, and he could walk free. Others said he was jealous of Von's rising stardom and felt pushed to the background. Either way, the damage was done. Emotions ran high. The OTF camp was devastated. Social media was in flames. Fans flooded Manny's old posts with snake emojis and death threats. Hashtags like #JusticeForVon and #TraitorAlert trended worldwide, but Durk, once again, didn't lash out publicly. Instead, he leaned into the legal momentum now fully on his side. Malcolm stood, his voice louder than ever. This court has seen the suppression of evidence, the orchestration of surveillance, and now a betrayal that proves this case was never about justice. It was about control, he continued. They chose to paint King Von as a villain, to silence Lil Durk, and to manipulate this courtroom. But the evidence says otherwise. And the people are watching. The judge nodded slowly. We've reached a point where this court must decide whether to move forward or throw this entire case out. A pause, then the judge declared, "This court is moving toward full dismissal pending further review, and a federal inquiry into misconduct is being launched immediately." The room erupted, applause, tears, screams of "We did it" echoed down the hallway. Fans outside heard the news seconds later, erupting into celebration as if a championship had been won. Durk hugged Malcolm tightly. For the first time in years, he smiled without pain behind his eyes. But this wasn't just a legal victory. It was a cultural earthquake. Within hours, more stories came forward. Rappers who had once kept quiet out of fear began speaking up. One Atlanta artist claimed he too had been offered industry protection in exchange for tracking his peers. Another said he was told to avoid collaborating with certain names, or his music would be shadow banned. The industry was being exposed in real time. Meanwhile, King Von's family announced plans to launch the Von Legacy Project, a nonprofit aimed at protecting young artists from exploitation and educating them on legal rights. Kayla Von, his sister, told a crowd at a press event, "They tried to erase my brother. Now we're making sure his name builds something that can't be destroyed." Durk pledged to donate his next tour's earnings to the foundation, but not everything was resolved. The federal agency at the center of the case refused to comment publicly. The label execs named in the leaked calls denied involvement. And Manny? He vanished. No interviews, no sightings, just silence. Some said he fled the city. Others claimed he was under witness protection. A few believed the streets would find him before the courts ever did. But Durk didn't speak on revenge. Instead, he dropped a surprise single at midnight. The track was called "They Ain't Stopped Me." No hook, no chorus. Just 4 minutes of raw, unfiltered pain. They took my twin, but not my soul. They buried truth, now I'm on goal. Feds tapped in, but I still roll, tried to break me. I ain't T-fold. The song went viral instantly. Fans called it the anthem of the broken and survived. Critics hailed it as Durk's most powerful work to date. Within 24 hours, it was trending on every platform and reached #1 on all major charts. But more than a hit, the song felt like closure for Durk. For Von, for the fans who'd watched their idols rise and fall under the weight of something bigger than beef, a system designed to exploit, then discard. And yet, even as celebrations broke out and new beginnings were written, some questions still remained unanswered. Why was Von really targeted? How far did the surveillance go? And most chilling of all, were there others on that list? The conspiracy had been cracked open, but not fully solved. For Lil Durk, freedom came with scars. Scars he'd carry forever. But through it all, one thing was clear. He refused to be silenced. And in speaking out, he gave voice not just to himself, but to every artist whose story had been manipulated, muted, or erased. He didn't just walk free. He walked with purpose and the game. It would never be the same again. The king may be gone, but his story, the real story, had finally been told. And for Lil Durk, the war wasn't over. And just like that, the story that began with silence ended with a roar. Lil Durk stood not just as a free man, but as a symbol of resistance, a voice that refused to be drowned in lies, betrayal, and the politics of power. The courtroom might be quiet now, but the streets, the internet, the culture, they're louder than ever. Fans are still reeling from the bombshells. The betrayal by Manny, the exposure of the FBI's shadow games, the whispers of secret industry deals. And let's not forget the biggest question that still haunts everyone. If they could do this to Von and Durk... Who's next? The industry is officially on edge. Trust is shattered. Alliances are breaking. And the streets are watching closely. Justice might have taken a step forward, but the war for truth, it's far from over. And now, we want to hear from you. Was King Von targeted from the very beginning? Do you believe there are more names on that hit list? And how deep do you think the music industry's involvement really goes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. No filter, no holding back. Make sure you hit that like button if you believe Von deserves justice. Subscribe for more stories that expose the truth behind the headlines, and turn on that bell so you don't miss the next explosive chapter. Because in this world, truth isn't just stranger than fiction. It's more dangerous too. This was the real story behind Lil Durk, King Von, and the case that shook the Castro culture. You just heard it here first. Stay tuned, stay woke, and above all, stay loud. Stay loud.